Greetings, my name is Monty Martin.
And I'm Kelly McLaughlin.
And we are the Dungeon
Dudes.
Welcome to our 2024 Bard Class Guide for D&D 5e.
We'll be taking an in-depth look at the Bard's class features, spells, subclasses, and build options to help you create a Bard for your next D&D character. There's a lot to discuss today, so let's get rolling. Today's episode is sponsored by the Discworld RPG, which is now live on Kickstarter. If you've never read the Discworld novels, they are an incredible fantasy series, and they are one of the biggest inspirations for Monty and I in our writing. And actually, I want to hand things over to the person who introduced me to this world and is very excited about this RPG. Monty, you've been talking about Discworld since the day I met you.
For me, the Color of Magic is one of my favorite novels of all time, and the color octarine is my favorite color. And so the Discworld RPG is super exciting to me, especially because it is an absolutely beautiful and whimsical RPG that is very rules light, filled with witty humor and great opportunities for puns, really drawing on the inspiration of the phenomenal writing of Sir Terry Pratchett, who honestly, just looking at it, there's a whole quick start rules package that is available from Modiphius that has all of the pre-generated characters and the basics of the rules, and this is like the perfect animal, because you couldn't do something super crunchy for Discworld. No. It's too fun, it's too whimsical, and it's always been a series of novels that like play fast and loose with timelines and continuity and even filled with anachronisms and real world references and back and forth and all sorts of inside jokes and everything like that. So it's a perfect like RPG to just play with your mates and just have an absolute ball.
Looking over the rule packet that we got, the way that the dice rolls work and the way that the character sheets look are both like two of my favorite things. Reading over the fact that you roll a die based on the DM's interpretation of whether you can sell, the fact that you can use the ability you want. You can use any ability for anything. You just need to pitch it to your DM, and the DM gets to be like, okay, that's good. I think you actually thought this through, so you get to use a higher die than if you just said something absolutely bizarre and then end up using a lower. I mean, bizarre could work. It's about the conversation.
Totally.
It sounds so fun at the table.
Exactly. It's such a bargain, which I think like really captures the fact that you have that negotiation. I think really captures sort of the fun humor and meta humor that exists in the Discworld novels, and it feels so appropriate for Terry Pratchett. The character sheet is basically a summary of like a very narrative lines. There's no like stats to speak of. You have your luck points, and that is kind of there's a way of measuring consequences. But for everyone that's like into really crunchy games, like this is such a wonderful breath of fresh air to just play a very rules-like game. And if you love Terry Pratchett and you love Discworld, I think you should check it out. I think it's beautiful and lovely, and for me it is an homage in game form to Sir Terry Pratchett. So this is one that we could probably go on for a long time about, but we're not, because we have to get on to our episode. But you should check the links below to make sure that you get in on this amazing Kickstarter while it's live. The quick start rules. If you have read any of the Discworld books, you will fall in love with it immediately. Check it out. It's all down below.
And now, on to the episode.
Some might say that a bard is a jack of all trades and a master of none, but the bard class is superlative in almost all pillars of play, capable of wielding spell, song, sword, and skills to contribute to combat, exploration, and unquestionably, they're the masters of social interaction, offering tons of amazing role-playing opportunities.
There are so many different ways to imagine your bard. There are so many different art forms that your bard might use as the inspiration for their magic and spellcasting. A lot of bards are going to be musicians, but there are many other ways you can imagine them. We even have subclasses that define different alternatives to just the basic musician. I've seen everything from painters, poets, and minstrels to dancers and a bunch of other stuff in between. So when you're imagining your bard, there's a vast array of ways that you can take that, but you may want to consider one of the classic archetypes for your bard.
The first is the warrior. You can be a bard that weaves together swordplay, spellcasting, and song to face your foes toe-to-toe, especially working in some wonderful quips and puns along the way.
You may want to play the controller bard and mesmerize your enemies with hypnotic illusions and beguiling enchantment magic.
Or you can play your bard as more of a support character to inspire your allies through song and poetry to greater heroics, giving them powerful buffs and healing their wounds.
Bards are an extraordinarily customizable and flexible class, and you can create a bard to fill almost any role in the party. However, these archetypes are worth considering if you're playing a bard for the first time.
So let's crack open the player's handbook to see the core traits for the bard. Very appropriately, as musicians and performers, the primary ability score for our bard is charisma. This is going to power your skills, your bardic inspiration, your spell casting, and so much more for the class. And so as we look at the ability scores, this will want to be one of your highest stats, if not your highest.
The hit point die that the bard get is a D8. This puts them about middle of the road. They're a little bit more robust than some of the primary spellcasters, but they're not as robust as most of the other melee characters. So they're falling in the middle there.
Their saving throw proficiencies are dexterity and charisma. Dexterity comes up all the time and helps your bard avoid things like fireballs and dragon's breath. Charisma is a bit of a rare saving throw, however, but it has some pretty nasty effects when it does come up.
Now, bards, being the jack of all trades that they are, get to pick 3 skill proficiencies, and they can choose any skills that they want in the entire game. There's no list here. Just pick your 3 favorites. I'd probably go for 1 at least, if not 2 of the charisma-based skills. And then maybe my third might be acrobatics or stealth or, something else depending on what type of bard I want to play.
Note that you're not actually automatically proficient in the performance skill as a bard, so you might want to make that your pick if you're not getting it from your background. And I personally think that I like to have both deception and persuasion on my bards. But intimidation tends to be the most you either want to go for that or not of the social skills. So I like to make sure that I have performance, persuasion, and deception on all my bards.
For tool proficiencies, you're actually going to get 3 musical instruments. Take your favorite picks. I've seen everything from the classic lute to the great bagpipe bard. There's a lot of different options in there.
I'd say being proficient with 3 musical instruments at first, that's impressive. I can't play one.
Well, thank you. I mean, technically I play the guitar and the bass, but those are essentially the same skill set.
Oh, be careful saying that.
Hey, listen, any rhythm guitarist can pick up a bass and play a decent bass.
You're going to start some fighting words.
Okay, as a bass player who also grew up playing rhythm guitar, I'm sorry. I think that it's a transferable skill. Okay, no, yes, there are better bass players and there are better guitarists, but it is a transferable skill. Both are stringed instruments that require
Speaking of other proficiencies, you only get simple weapons on your bard, so incidentally be careful because bards are not inherently proficient with the iconic rapier. It's a martial weapon. And you only get light armor. No shields, no medium armor, just light armor on your bard. So let's dive into the class features that our bards get. The big one, to kick things off, that all bards are full spellcasters. We start right away at level 1 with first level spells, some cantrips, and go all the way up to 9th level spells once we get to level 17.
And as we said before, charisma is the spellcasting ability for your bards. This means that to find out your spell saving throw, you're going to take a 8 plus your proficiency bonus plus your charisma modifier. And for those spell attacks, you're going to get a bonus that is your proficiency bonus plus your charisma modifier. So charisma is very important here. The bard features table also shows the total spell slots and spells prepared for each level.
One thing that is worth noting for the bards is that bards don't have many attack-based spells in their core spell list. But there's a lot of enchantment and illusion spells that are based on saving throws. And some of the bard healing spells will also care about your charisma modifier for the number of hit points restored. However, it is possible to have a bardic repertoire that does not involve a lot of saving throws or attack rolls at all, depending on the spell choice that you have. So there are some interesting options where your charisma might not come into play too much, even though you're casting a lot of spells. So that's an interesting way of looking at things, although you're still probably going to want charisma at your highest stat. What is important to note is that while you gain all your spell slots on a long rest, bards as spellcasters have a list of spells known. You have to choose your spells that you have prepared when you gain a level, and you can replace one spell that you know with another one whenever you gain a level. But otherwise, you have to choose your repertoire carefully because unlike, say, clerics and druids who get to re-prepare anything they want on their spell list, or wizards who can learn new spells over the course of their adventure, with a bard, you have the spells that you learn when you level up, and that's what you're stuck with.
And for this, you're going to want to be pretty careful with your selection. You're only going to have that limited number of spells known.
Once we go through all the other bard features, we'll be diving into our recommended spells, but one of the big themes that you'll see with that spell list is that you want a lot of really multifunctional spells. It can be very difficult to get too niche with your spell selection because then that's all the spells that you have. If you take every single healing spell, that's awesome, but then what about when you don't need to heal anybody?
Yeah, I think it's good to remember that you are the jack of all trades, so be diverse with your selections. The next feature that you do gain at first level, and another one of the most important features for the Bard, is Bardic Inspiration. Bardic Inspiration gives you a pool of dice that you can hand out to your allies to inspire them, or use for many other things depending on the Bard you're playing. You have a number of Bardic Inspiration dice equal to your Charisma modifier. They start as D6s, but they increase in size as you level up. As a bonus action, you can grant a Bardic Inspiration die to another creature within 60 feet who can see or hear you. The inspired creature can use the die within the next hour to add it to a failed D20 test. This could be an attack roll, an ability check, or a saving throw, potentially turning the failure into a success.
Now, you have a number of Bardic Inspiration die equal to your Charisma modifier, so another reason why you're going to want that Charisma pretty high. And initially, you regain them all on a long rest. But starting at level 5, Bards regain all their Bardic Inspiration die on a short rest, thanks to the Font of Inspiration feature. This also allows Bards to regain a Bardic Inspiration die by expending a spell slot as well. It goes up to a D8 at level 5, a D10 at level 10, and a D12 at 15th level. And at 18th level, you also regain 2 uses of Bardic Inspiration if you roll initiative, and have less than that thanks to Superior Inspiration. Now, Bardic Inspiration can be used both in and out of combat, because outside of combat, you can inspire your allies to help with skill checks to get through any skill challenges or exploration scenarios that you might be going through. And in combat, you can use it to bolster your allies, making their attacks more accurate or making them more likely to succeed their saving throws. So I do find that I really like getting them back on a short rest starting at level 5 because it lets you be very generous with handing them out.
I was going to say, once you hit level 5, sort of the chains are broken on whether you should feel restrained on your Bardic Inspiration. And I think starting at level 5, hand them out as often as you can. Remind your players that you've given them Bardic Inspiration. Maybe have very colorful dice that are used for your Bardic Inspiration that you can place in front of your other players. I think the biggest issue is less the Bard forgetting Bardic Inspiration and more the other players forgetting that they got Bardic Inspiration.
Yes, and one of the really important elements of Bardic Inspiration is that it is applied on a failed roll. So one of the things to remember is that if you're giving the Bardic Inspiration die to your friend and they scoop it up when they're making the D20 roll initially, they don't need to do that. They can roll their D20 first, find out if they succeeded, and if they didn't, then they roll the Bardic Inspiration die to turn the failure into a success.
That's also when I would remind them. If they roll and they're like, oh, I failed, and then you say, hey, I gave you Bardic Inspiration, use that die.
Yeah. And this is the kind of the quote unquote like tactical way to use it, because if you just roll the die with the skill check and technically you can't use Bardic Inspiration on a check that succeeded without it.
Yeah.
It helps you like conserve your uses of it. I find that it's always a good idea to give a Bardic Inspiration die to the fighter or the paladin or the barbarian, because they're going to be making tons of attacks. They're probably going to be staring down some saving throws. That's always a good use of it. The rogue loves having Bardic Inspiration because they can add it to their skill checks. So does the ranger for that respect. The one thing that might have you a little bit disappointed is you actually cannot give Bardic Inspiration to yourself.
Yeah.
Yep.
You can inspire everybody else, but your inspiration is much harder to find.
Yeah. Now, what is cool is that Bardic Inspiration can also be used alongside regular inspiration. And so handing out both inspiration and Bardic Inspiration, you can have all these rerolls and you can have all these bonuses. The presence of a bard in a party means that you start nailing a lot of those skill checks.
It's always a good day when I have both heroic inspiration and Bardic Inspiration, like in real life. That's when I get most of my writing done. Starting at level 2, we have another amazing class feature, Expertise. There are several classes that gain Expertise. We always love seeing Expertise. Expertise, you gain it in 2 skills that you're already proficient in, and it doubles your proficiency bonus in those skills. And you're going to get 2 more at 9th level.
I'm taking Persuasion and Deception on my bard.
Yeah.
For my Expertise, my first ones. And then the level 9 ones, I'm going to see where the campaign's going.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What type of campaign are we running here? Again, sometimes I like stealth or acrobatics on my bard, but it depends.
Now, Jack of all trades comes online at 3rd level, and this picks up your non-proficient skills. So for any ability check that you lack proficiency in, you still get to add half your proficiency bonus to that roll. And incidentally, this can include a bunch of ability checks that normally you wouldn't add you wouldn't be able to add a proficiency bonus to anyway. So be aware of those, because those are kind of fun things. But it does mean that, like, you might not grab athletics on your bard, but you'll probably still have like a +1 or a +2, depending on your level, to it. Even if you decided not to pick up intimidation, you still get a half benefit from it. So you're kind of a little bit good at everything.
It's a very useful ability, and it really does make bards incredible at skill challenges. At 4th level, bards gain ability score improvements, and they get to do this again at 8th, 12th, and 16th level. And at 19th level, you're going to gain an epic boon feat.
At level 7, you gain Counter Charm, which allows you to use a reaction to give an ally within 30 feet a reroll with advantage on a failed saving throw against a charm or fear effect. You have unlimited uses of this, and charm and fear effects suck when they happen to the player characters, because they often mean that you are losing a turn when this happens. And so just having a reaction to fix that is superb.
At 10th level, you gain one of the coolest features I think bards get, and that's magical secrets. You can now choose any spell from the druid, cleric, or wizard spell list in addition to the bard spell list when you learn or retrain a spell. These spells count as bard spells for you, and that essentially means that now, for the rest of the game from 10th level onwards, you have 4 spell lists to choose from when you're choosing your spells. And you can actually drop some of the spells you weren't using as you level up and replace them with some really prime choices. There's a lot of great spells across these spell lists, and depending on the type of bard you're playing, you may want to look at those spell lists and grab some great cleric, druid, or wizard spells. There's some great picks. We'll talk about those later too.
Now, there's a few ranger, paladin, warlock spells that you won't be able to nab. So sorry, no divine smite, hunter's mark, hex, or hunger of Hadar, or fine steed for you bards. But the amazing selection of spells that you have to choose from here, particularly the high level wizard and wizard spells. It's the high level wizard spells. You'll see when we get to the spell recommendations. It's the high level wizard spells. Is really juicy. And can really add a lot of power to your bard, right as you get into the high levels of play.
I personally like the cleric spell list. We'll see some of the options there, and we'll talk a little bit about it, but there are some great picks, especially if you're playing a more combat focused bard. At 20th level, if you make it this far, you get Words of Creation. You always have Power Word Kill and Power Word Heal prepared. When you cast either spell, you could target a second creature within 10 feet of the first target. Both of those are incredible spells, and doubling them up is pretty awesome.
Yeah, you just might be wanting to use your 9th level spell slot for that juicy wizard spell that you picked up instead.
True.
With all that in mind, let's look at how we would pick our ability scores from our bard. I think it's best in here to begin with go backwards. Because I think regardless of whether you're playing the warrior, controller, supporter style, I think you want to max out your charisma.
Put your highest stat in charisma, also put your +2 in charisma from your background, and you're good to go. This is going to impact your bardic inspiration. It's going to impact your spellcasting. It's going to impact some of the skills that you're probably going to be using the most. So take charisma as your highest stat.
Intelligence and wisdom for bards can be relevant when you're making skill checks. And you may want to, if you're rolling your stats, put some bonuses in here if you have them to spare. But if you're using point buy, it's really hard with your bard to justify spending the points on boosting these too high. Again, you can for role-playing reasons if you want to. They can impact a couple of the knowledge skills and skills like perception and saving throws, obviously, but it feels like the other physical attributes are a little bit more pressing and important for the bard.
As with all characters, constitution is always important. It dictates your hit points, and it also is going to be relevant if you're concentrating on spells. Because we are spellcasters, you do want a pretty decent constitution. It doesn't necessarily need to be your second highest, although the controller and supporters may want that to be the case. They may want to put their second highest stat in con with a +1 to make sure that they can maintain concentration on those wonderful control spells.
And dexterity is another important stat for bards, particularly bards that are going the warrior archetype and might wanting to be using finesse-based melee weapons or ranged weapons to attack with. You could put a 15 here and put your +1 here or con. Honestly, I think the question of do you go for the 16 in con or dex and the 14 in the other is really a style choice, and I wouldn't. There's an argument for going anyway with this with any sort of build that you go, depending on everything else. You could even make an argument that the warrior bards should actually max out their dexterity first and make charisma more secondary.
There's a play there where, again, you take all the spells that are focused on buffing you and your allies and not making like attack rolls or saving throws.
When it comes to the backgrounds that you pair with this, you're going to be able to get the ability score boost that you want anywhere if you go with the charlatan background. That's also going to get you the skilled feat, which for us now counting along at home means that you're going to be proficient in 8 skills out the gate, which is pretty great. Even more if you play like an elf or a human. Alternatively, I think the musician feat from the entertainer background is really hard to say no to.
It's great for the warrior build because it gives you that dex and charisma.
Yeah, and the musician feat is going to hand out heroic inspiration to a whole bunch of your party members.
Yeah.
And so being able to be the source of heroic inspiration and bardic inspiration for your entire party is really, really good.
And I think that for the warrior, the wayfarer for lucky is also a great choice. Lucky on a bard just feels correct. For the controller and supporter, you may want to look at the merchant, which gives you lucky, or you may want to look at the hermit, which gives you the healer origin feat. We didn't mention strength. You can dump your strength. But there is also that weird argument that, like, if you're playing the warrior, maybe there's a strength build out there, but I wouldn't pick it.
Yeah.
But you could. But you should.
Yeah. It's more of a, like, I'm going to be a weird paladin.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You want to be a weird paladin? Be a weird paladin.
Yeah.
But I would pick dex over strength.
So when it comes to species, I really like having lucky and musician on my part. And I like the extra skill as well. So the human, I think, is a really solid pick for the bard.
I mean, a human bard is a human bard. We love a human bard. I do think that there's something pretty iconic about the halfling bard. And halflings get their luck ability. Yeah. And so, like, if you take a halfling bard with lucky, I don't know, you're just whimsying your way through every encounter.
Yes. Obviously, there is something quite iconic about elf bards of all stripes, and I think tiefling bards too. And getting the extra spells from these magical based species, I think is a really cool way because you can cast those spells with your spell slots. The high elf in particular gets an extra cantrip, which you can switch to being cast based on charisma. So the ways to kind of sneak in an extra cantrip or an extra spell known is really fun on Bard.
I also think that when you're looking at the species, you know, there's the iconic options that you picture with their little lutes and everything, but with the vast array of instruments that you have at your disposal, you can actually start to imagine pairing different instruments with different species. So I think the dwarf with the bagpipes or the orc with the drums
Yes.
are pretty great.
Did you ever get the Dragonborn Bard throat singer in Baldur's Gate 3?
No?
Did you unlock that secret? Yeah. Yes, Dragonborn throat singing. And of course, or you could be an Azamar with a heavenly chorus.
Yeah.
I also think that the Tiefling Bard with the golden fiddle.
That's fun.
Yeah, is yeah. For all you fans of Devil Went Down to Georgia.
There's some great, I mean, I said the orc with the drums, but you could also do just a war horn.
Oh, that would be cool too.
And that's your music. That's how you cast your spells, is blowing your war horn.
Yeah.
There's so many cool ways to imagine pairing those together that any species works.
I also really liked, we've seen more in recent things like Rings of Power, like the dwarves singing to them.
Yeah, I love that.
I do too. I mean, I'm a huge fan of anyone that follows the channel knows I love Dwarf Fortress, and the Steam version of Dwarf Fortress has an absolute banger of a soundtrack, including the amazing Drinking Industry. And I just think that like you got dwarven music. Oh yeah. Drinking Industry.
I think that it's important to state that music is an integral part of any culture.
Yeah.
And so no matter what species you are, think about how and not just music, because bards are more than just musicians. How does art present itself in the culture of the species that you've chosen? Whether that's through dance, painting, or it looks different for everybody. And so you can really broaden the horizons here. Does your Goliath carve runes and things, and that's their art form? That could be the art form.
Right. And it could be more of a again, a physical based thing, working in a more physical media like sculpture, like maybe your Goliath, they are like a shaper and they have stone or clay, and they're all of it is based on some sort of like sculpture, right?
A dwarf who makes rock sculptures and carvings, like it's...
But species, culture, background, all of these things collide with music and art. And I think that you can really draw a lot of inspiration from a lot of real world culture as well, overlaying that with your species choice in appropriate ways, or playing against it. You know, maybe your bard, even regardless of their species, is a world traveler and they have explored many different styles. I mean, when you look at music and art in the real world, I think one of the most brilliant and beautiful things is the exchange of ideas and people coming together from different backgrounds and different places to create art and music together by sharing their experiences. I think, for me, I think that art is one of the greatest forces of connection in the world. And so I think that can really typify a lot of versatility.
When we get to the feats available for bards, there's some great options that you're going to want to consider here. I think regardless of the build, you're going to want to look at Warcaster. Yeah. You're going to want to look at Inspiring Leader, which is great for bards, or Resilient Constitution, just to shore up those saving throws.
Warrior bards may want to look at feats like Weapon Master, Defensive Duelist, and the Dual Wielder feat as well if they really want to go heavy on the dual wielding style for warrior bards can really wreak some havoc.
Yeah. And for controllers and supporters, you may want to look at something like Actor or Skill Expert, Telepathic or Telekinetic. There's a really great play here with combining something like Actor with Disguise Self, can really make for some fun shenanigans on a very charismatic bard.
Now, when we're picking cantrips for our bard, there are two go-to options that you have for just if you want to deal damage. And those are Starry Wisp and True Strike. True Strike is great for any bard that wants to use a weapon because it lets you use your charisma modifier in place of your dexterity or strength with that weapon. You can use it with melee or ranged attacks, and you get a little bit of extra damage out there. Even non-warrior focused bards might want to grab True Strike just to hit a little bit harder, because sometimes you will be surprised at how often a bard finds themselves in a situation where they've got their important spell out, they've got their bardic inspiration out, and you just want to hit something. Yeah.
And if you are planning to debuff your enemies, the bards have a very special little cantrip that's only for them called Vicious Mockery. This get your like Shakespearean
insult
insults
generator. Yeah.
The Shakespearean insult generator. Write down a list of your favorites, and every time that you cast Vicious Mockery, throw out a great Shakespearean insult, or depending on your table, just something rambunctious and terrible to say to the enemies.
Yeah. It debuffs their attack rolls, does a bit of psychic damage, so it's a great debuff and damage at the same time. Warriors may want to grab Blade Ward. This is a great way to, but even non-warrior bards might want to too, because Bard's AC is pretty bad. And Blade Ward is a good defensive little cantrip to pull out when you need it. Beyond this, utility, Mage Hand, Dancing Lights,
Minor
Illusion, all great picks for any bard. Moving on to our big spell selection. This is really going to define your bardic repertoire, and we're going to be recommending more spells than you can choose with a single bard. So think about your style, and it's worth noting that regardless of your chosen style, like if you want to be a warrior or supporter, it can be worthwhile to diversify just a little bit rather than going all in on any one of these ones.
So kicking things off with some first level picks. Universally, no matter what type of bard you're playing, you may want to consider spells like Disguise Self. We mentioned earlier, pairing Disguise Self and Actor is pretty awesome. You also might want to look at something like Speak with Animals. This is great for gathering intelligence in the wilderness, or, getting helpful scouts in the form of your animal friends. You're charismatic enough that you can probably, talk a chipmunk into helping you.
Warrior bards will really like this short range of color spray and command for controlling enemies in close quarters battle. Whereas supporters, Fairy Fire is a great way to give advantage on attack rolls to your entire party. And I think Healing Word is kind of a great back pocket emergency spell that any bard should consider as a bonus action heal.
I think that controllers will want to look at spells like Dissonant Whispers, which again is another very specifically bard feeling spell. And it also forces the enemy to back up. I have had my life saved by a bard with Dissonant Whispers.
Gelatinous Cube.
We were in a hallway with a gelatinous cube, and he just kept casting Dissonant Whispers while I was picking a lock at the end of the hallway, and he saved our lives. Thanks, Joe.
Hideous Laughter and Sleep are also two great concentration spells for first level. You might take those spells and be casting them up to high level spells. They're just that good.
As we move on to second level spells, Cloud of Daggers and Invisibility might be perfect choices for the warrior.
Whereas the controller might want to grab things like Heat Metal, Enlarge Reduce, and the amazing Suggestion for your Jedi mind trick.
And Aid, Enhanceability, and Lesser Restoration are perfect options for the supporter.
As we move into third level spells, I think that all bards love to play with illusions, and Major Image is a fantastically creative spell. I especially love the fact that you can upcast it to a fourth level slot and you don't have to concentrate on it.
I think that warriors could benefit from taking a spell like Fear. Fear is actually, having the frightened condition on your enemies is great. And so the warrior can really play with that.
Other great battlefield control spells include Hypnotic Pattern and Slow, and supporters might want to pack Dispel Magic in case of emergency.
When we move on to fourth level, I think universally Dimension Door, just for the movement capabilities that you get out of that spell. It's incredible. And you can bring somebody with you.
Now, for warrior bards, here's where you start getting your first real taste of the damage output that you can do. This comes in the form of the spell Fount of Moonlight. When you cast Fount of Moonlight, you get resistance to radiant damage, and enemies that hit you have to make a con save or become blinded. But while the spell's in effect, you deal an extra 2d6 damage with all your melee attacks. This is an especially juicy spell for warrior bards that are going to go the dual wielder route, because the more attacks you can make, the more you dip into that extra 2d6 radiant damage. It gets really, really good.
Yeah, I think that Fount of Moonlight is such a fun spell for any bard that's going to be dishing it out in combat. I think that the controller may want to consider Phantasmal Killer. It's an all right spell. I might still take Fount of Moonlight.
Yeah. Greater Invisibility and Polymorph are also amazing spells at this level.
At 5th level, I think that the warriors will want to consider something like Animate Objects. If you aren't hitting hard enough with your sword, you can hit the enemy with everything else in the room. I love Animate Objects. We also have Yolanda's Regal Presence, which is another great option for warriors.
Controllers are going to love Dominate Person, and I like to make Synaptic Static my face-melting solo.
Yeah.
Also very good to combine Synaptic Static with Bane, another great first-level spell.
Greater Restoration and Raise Dead might be perfect choices for the supporter.
As we move on into 6th-level spells, the controller might want to grab Eyebite or the incredible Mass Suggestion, which Mass Suggestion can just end entire encounters like that.
And Hero's Feast is just a good pickup at this level for really anybody.
Hero's Feast is the baseline of a great combination of boosting your party's hit points. If you have Hero's Feast, Aid, and the Inspiring Leader feat, all of these stack because Hero's Feast and Aid increase their maximum hit points, and Inspiring Leader as a feat adds to their temporary hit points. So you can incredibly buff up your party's hit points by using these two spells in this feat together.
Now we're moving into the high level spells here. At 7th level, Universally Teleport is just a great choice. It makes world travel pretty easy, as long as you know where you're going.
A warrior might be tempted by Mordenkainen's Sword, but I think that you're going to do more damage with Font of Moonlight.
You might want Prismatic Spray for the controller, or Power Word Fortify or Resurrection for the supporter.
At 8th level, you get access to Glibness, which is an incredible spell that makes your lies undetectable and means that you can't roll less than a 15 on many charisma checks. This is an amazing spell to just completely steamroll any social encounter.
Warriors might want to consider Power Word Stun, and controllers might want to look at Dominate Monster, while Mind Blank might be a great choice for supporters.
And as we go into 9th level spells, Foresight is the ultimate buff for the warrior. Prismatic Wall is the definition of battlefield control, and the flexibility of True Polymorph is a perfect choice for supporters.
But that's not all the spells that we get, because as we said earlier, bards get their magical secrets, and this opens up the possibilities of the types of spells that you could gain access to. So now, if we look at what we might take from the wizard, cleric, and druid spell list, let's talk about that. For the warriors, you may want to consider your magical secrets. You may want to grab Shield, which is a 1st level spell, Misty Step as a 2nd level spell, Haste as a 3rd level spell, and Conjure Minor Elementals as a 4th level spell. I would also throw in here Spirit Guardians as a potential pick. If Conjure Minor Elementals isn't your jam, Spirit Guardians might be a great choice for warriors as well.
The asterisk here being Conjure Minor Elementals is a bit of a more powerful version of Fount of Moonlight. You can crank your damage into the stratosphere with the way the spell was initially printed in the 2024 Player's Handbook. So if this spell is toned down in the future, please check with your Dungeon Master, because it is pretty strong.
Controllers, you may want to get Counterspell or Banishment. Banishment is just such a fun spell, especially if you're fighting extraplanar enemies. And Wall of Force is a great control spell.
Supporters may want to grab Bless, or the amazing healing from Aura of Vitality. They might want to pick up something useful like Fly or Revivify, or another big heal in the form of the Heal spell.
And all bards might want to consider Fireball. Who doesn't love Fireball? Yeah. Contingency is a great wizard spell to pick up. It's a 6th level spell. And if you can, grab Wish. It's a 9th level spell and you want it.
Yeah, I would consider Wish the must-have. I would take this as my first 9th level spell over and above all the other 9th level spells that we have recommended or discussed. Just take Wish at level 17. Don't look back.
As we come to the various subclasses, we kick things off with the College of Dance Bard. This is a unique choice for warriors that are interested in unarmed fighting. They gain unarmed defense and make unarmed strikes using their dexterity instead of their strength, and the damage increases based on their Bardic Inspiration die.
You get to make an unarmed strike each time you expend a Bardic Inspiration die. And what this means, and this was clarified in a D&D Beyond article, is that when you give an ally Bardic Inspiration, with your bonus action, you get to punch someone, or I like to imagine doing like a wild dancey kick.
Oh, yeah.
As part of that bonus action. You also get to roll your Bardic Inspiration die, expending it, and give that as a bonus to your entire party, and you can dash away from enemies as a reaction that end their turn up to you. Also expending a Bardic Inspiration to do so, which means that an enemy that ends their turn beside you, you get to dash away from them, and in the process, kick them in the chin.
And lastly, you can gain evasion like a rogue, and you can share that with allies as well. So Dance Bard, very mobile, very dancey.
The College of Glamour Bard gains the notoriety for having one of the best pieces of art in the entire player's handbook. A piece of art that would have been sure to awaken things in pubescent Monty.
I'm a big fan of Gem and the Holograms, and this art just speaks to me. I love, this is my favorite art in the whole book. I love it.
Yeah.
I have a type, okay?
I don't blame you.
It's Gem and the Holograms.
I don't blame you at all. This is a great choice for supporters and control bards because you always get Charm Person, Mirror Image, and Command prepared, and you get this amazing ability, Mantle of Inspiration, that for one use of Bardic Inspiration, your entire party gets a bunch of temporary hit points, and they all can spend their reactions to move. This is an incredible ability. Just whole party, everybody moves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a great way to kick off a combat encounter, or use in the middle, or just use every single turn. You can also charm and frighten your foes when you cast illusion and enchantment spells. Charm and frighten are both amazing debuffs, so use them.
And bards have a lot of illusion and charms and enchantment spells.
Yeah.
And you also get to adopt a majestic presence, which means enemies have to make charisma saving throws, or their attacks against you just miss.
The lore bard is the bard for bards. Do you like bards? You get more bard on your bards.
Yeah, it's just, I like being a bard. I want to just do more bard things, and I want to be more good at just doing the core bard things. The big thing here for controllers and supporters that you're going to love is that you get to use cutting words as a reaction, and this lets you use Bardic Inspiration to debuff enemy attack rolls, damage, or ability checks. So you now have the ability to both buff your allies, but also debuff your enemies. One of the best uses for this is that when an ally gets hit with an attack, you can be like, no, Bardic Inspiration minus D6 to your attack roll, that attack misses.
Yeah, it's those prime moments where your ally has an AC of 18 and the monster rolled a 19 or 20, and you're like, yeah, I can make that into a miss.
Yeah.
They also gain bonus skill proficiencies and 2 extra spells known from the cleric, druid, or wizard spellist. So they get extra magical secrets. So if you love those magical secrets, you get 2 more.
Yep, and if you're a lore bard that's human, you took the skilled feat. So 2 from your background, 1 from being a human, 3 more from the skilled feat. So we're at 6, 3 just from being a bard, and now 3 more.
I mean, who needs to be a jack of all trades when you're actually master of all?
Yeah. Yeah. When it's a lot, you can get a lot of skill proficiencies with the lore bard.
Lastly, we come to the Valor Bard. This is the perfect choice for warriors. You're going to get a whole bunch of features that are going to help you out in martial combat, including proficiency with martial weapons, medium armor, and shield.
So go ahead and pick up that rapier. Combat Inspiration is going to let you use Bardic Inspiration in more ways. Your allies can now use the Bardic Inspiration to boost their damage rolls or their AC as a reaction to attacks.
And you get extra attack. And you can actually use a cantrip instead of one of your attacks.
So you can stab someone and cast Vicious Mockery at the same time.
Oh, that's just beautiful. To stab somebody and insult them.
Yes, I hope you got my point. And one of the other kind of fun things with this is that you can actually combine it with True Strike, which is another great damage boost there. And then at higher levels, you also gain the ability to, when you cast a spell with your action, make 1 weapon attack as a bonus action. The Valor Bard is a great place if you want to do that dual wielding bard that uses like a short sword or two scimitars and goes with like conjure minor elementals or
Fount of Moonlight.
Fount of Moonlight, because if you grab the dual wielder feat, you grab the weapon master feat, you take a level of fighter, you can end up making 4 attacks per turn, boost that up. Like you could end up being a really great damage dealer as a Valor Bard if you build them to take advantage of all the melee options for dual wielders and all the buff spells that you can combine that with.
Yeah, I think that Valor Bards are one of the best options for a spell sword in the game.
Yeah.
If you like spellcasting, but you still want to be potent in melee, check out the Valor Bard. When we come to role-playing your bard, there's many questions that you may want to ask. First and foremost, are you a musician, or does your bard instead perform things like dance, poetry, oration, or perhaps they are proficient in other art forms like painting, sculptures, writing, dance? Could be anything. So what's yours?
And what's your muse? How did your character develop a passion for the arts? Why does art speak to you? I mean, I find that even as an artist, I have trouble answering this question, but I think that like for every artist, there's always this tension of like feeling like you just have to create.
Yeah.
And that you have to tell stories, and that there's just something that you have to share. But I find that everyone articulates that in a different way. And some artists just want to experience beauty. Some artists want to make people think. Some artists want to, and I think in a beautiful way, want to use their art to change the world. And I do think art can change the world. And I think that that's a great reason to be an adventurous bard.
Where does your character's magic come from? Does it come from music, or are you inherently magic and you're just using music as your outlet for that magic? Is it the power of rock that your music comes from?
Moreover, what does your magic actually look like? Do you cast spells by performing song? Do musical bars and notes appear when you cast magic? Or is your magic a little bit more subtle than that? Or is it bombastic like a heavy metal show, complete with pyrotechnics and projections?
Did you have a mentor or teacher? Oftentimes when we are learning art, there's somebody who helps us along the way. I'm sure both Monty and I have many people that we could name that helped us define our art as we were growing up.
And I think every artist has influences as well. Like there's always enough, even if you are kind of self-taught, every artist kind of has their personal canon of like other musicians that influence them. And music has a genealogy all of its own. Like you can take almost any musician or band or performer and be like, well, they were actually responding to this musician. Like they were inspired by this because that's what they grew up listening to.
Yeah.
Right. So what was that like for you?
Another one that I think is a really important question is, do your musical instruments, or whatever your artistic implement is, does it have a special meaning for you? Does it have an origin story? What is that instrument for you? I know that I still have my first electric guitar. I remember buying it. I remember everything about it. I covered it in like stickers of my favorite bands. It sucks. It's not even a good guitar, but I still have it because I never want to get rid of it. It's a very special guitar for me. And I'm sure that everybody out there has that origin story of their first musical instrument, or maybe a musical instrument that was really important for you. I also have an old acoustic that was my mother's, and she gave it to me when I was like 10, 11. And that's what I learned to play guitar on. So it wasn't my first guitar. I felt like it was my mom's guitar, but I still have it, and I'm going to have it forever. It sounds like garbage now. It's way too old. It's like the wood is warped, and it's so old and archaic, but it's my mom's acoustic guitar. And what is the story behind your musical instrument, and what does it mean to you?
Now, of course, you can always look to real life musicians and performers for inspiration for your bard, but I also like to look at real life song lyrics, poems, rhymes, puns, or phrases that you can repurpose as your repertoire to quote when you cast spells or give out bardic inspiration. A great place to go for this beyond real world music and real world songs that you can repurpose as your own character's songs are things like we mentioned, the Shakespearean insult generator, or the poems and sonnets of William Shakespeare. But I'll say that like there's no need to like go quote unquote Renaissance or medieval with this. Like you don't have to look at Shakespeare for like the pinnacle of examples. Like, if you want to quote a Cardi B song in the middle of your D&D game, go ahead.
I just imagine critting a goblin with a bow while singing "Shot Through the Heart."
Yeah.
Yeah. And actually, so that brings me to a role-playing question I think is really great here is, are you always performing? Even when you're not in combat and you're not doing your music, are you the sort of person who is like boisterous and loud and always a little Hollywood, you know what I mean? Or are you a little more modest off stage? Is it only when you decide to cast spells that that persona comes alive? I feel like both are actually great ways to play the bard. Either you're always like, I'm the greatest performer of all time, or you're like, don't mind me, I'm just doing my art and I'll help when I need to. Both are great.
Of course, musicians are legendary for having their vices. Make sure, though, that your bard doesn't join the 27 Club, but you probably got a few dark secrets, a couple fears, a lot of flaws, and just a bunch of different compulsions or addictions or obsessions. Every bard's got them. Whether it's giving in to your libido, your appetite, your urges.
Greed.
You
might just be in it for the money.
Are you a sellout? Did you sell out? Had you become a corporate shill? Or maybe you're just always going to stick it to the man. And then you became the man.
Damn the man. Save the empire.
Yeah.
And how did you meet your adventuring companions? Perhaps you're following along with them to chronicle the adventures that they go on and you're just there to tell their stories. Or perhaps you've gone to write a story of your own and you needed a group to join you. I'm thinking there are bards like Jaskier from The Witcher, who kind of joins Geralt to get inspiration for his songs. But then I also see a character like Star-Lord as a bard who got this band together because he wants to be the leader. He wants to be the cool face of the best adventuring group in the world. Again, depends on your vibe. So what type of bard are you going to be?
I think that bards are an amazingly fun class, and there's so many ways to roleplay them, from the serious to the silly, and make no mistake, they are one of the strongest and most potent classes in the game. I love that a bard can be however you want to make it. It to me, it totally encapsulates that idea that music can be anything, and that there's so many different styles and different genres of music, just like there's so many different styles and genres of bards. So whether you're going to play your bard as a sellout imitator that's just cranking out from another pop culture band, or whether they're going to change music forever with something the world has never seen before, have fun playing a bard.
Tell us about your ideas for your next bard character in the comments below.
The videos that we make on our channel are made possible thanks to the incredible generosity of our Patreon supporters. Links are down below to get in on our Patreon.
And make sure to check out our adventures in the world of Drakenheim, which airs Tuesday evenings here on YouTube. You can check out all the previous episodes right up over here.
And we got plenty more content on all the class guides for the 2024 PHP right up over here.
Please subscribe to our channel, like this video, and ring that bell so that you never miss an episode.
Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next time
in the dungeon.